This story is about a guy who is now sitting chained to a chair and gagged in his mouth. An unknown man asks him if he wants to go back to square one, hinting that he wants to chop off his fingers. After the masked man has done his thing, he starts reading out the biography of the guy who is bleeding sitting on the chair. The young man's name is Kim Sojin. He is 20 years old, comes from a country called Korea, which is on Earth. The bio also stated that he loves to play games, hates desserts-flavored matches. Sojin sitting on a chair was clearly puzzled by all this, but no sooner had he said something than suddenly an axe came flying towards his face. The warden approached Sojin and asked him if he was deaf, saying that the young man needed a hearing aid. And since he needed one, the warden decided to give it to him. But what he did was horrible. He just put holes in his head, cutting off the young man's ears. I hope I never become hard of hearing, as I don't need hearing aids like that. Anyway, the warden was glad that the young man could hear him well now, and so he asked Sojin again, and his answer should only be yes. The man asked about the second princess of Netanya, saying that the man who killed her was our protagonist. That's when Sojin wondered when things went wrong, and what happened to his normal life. His name is Sojin, he was 20 years old, he was a college student who loved to play games, and at the moment he was playing his favorite game. By the way, if you look at the game, you can see that it's the game Apex Legends. Sojin had just entered college like all college students. Leaving for college, his mom asked her son not to go to cyber cafe today. Sojin says okay, but we all know he's going there. As soon as Sojin opened the door, he found himself in a completely different place. He saw a group of people in front of him, headed by a girl with white hair and pointed ears. She looked like an elf. Sojin was surprised at what he saw, but he was even more surprised that the door behind him had vaporized. Soon 3 more people appeared around him. As it turned out, 4 warriors had been summoned into this world. There was a high school student, a child, a grandfather, and also our Kim Sojin, a college student. Everyone, including Sojung, couldn't understand what was going on, and our young man was even shaken by it all. But as it turned out, he was only excited because he thought that he was now the main hero of this world. In that case, he was sure that he could now learn sword fighting, be a sage and a necromancer. Oh no, not a necromancer. Anyway, Sojin was willing to go through all of this, and then he would be the best. Suddenly, Sojin shouted the word status, hoping to open a status window, and the people standing around didn't understand what he was doing. But in the end, no status window appeared. The girl with white hair explained that they didn't have such a thing as a status window, but they did have a skill. She decided to greet the warriors by introducing herself as the second princess of this world, Netanya. She smiled and happily looked forward to their work together. But first, Netanya wanted to test the skills of the new arrivals. The first in line was Sojin. The girl asked him to spread his arms to the side and freeze slightly. Looking at his staff, the girl was surprised, and so was Sojin. Netanya was shocked, or maybe it was confusion, but she said that Sojin had the accumulation skill. After saying that, her subordinates' heads were blasted with blue lightning in the same second. Turning around, she asked them to stop, but her body was pierced by the unknown person's hand. All of this happened in front of the new arrivals, and especially Sojung. The unknown man pulled his hand out of the princess' body, and she slumped to the ground, holding on to the hole in her body. Looking at Sojin, she tried to say something to him, but the unknown man thrust his finger forward, and then a blue beam pierced Netanya's body, leaving only the lower part of her body. Everything was drenched in blood, and Sojin stood in fear, not knowing what he should do now. He looked at the unknown entity, and it immediately approached him. The entity put its hand forward and began to bring it closer to Sojin's face until it completely covered his face. When Sojin finally regained consciousness, among those who had survived, including him and the other warriors, only Sojin was covered in blood. At this moment, a restraining collar was around the young man's neck. The overseer laughingly explained that it was useless to use his magic powers as they were now inoperative. Looking to the side, Sojin realized that this was a state prison called Gehenna. The bald man asked if he was Kim Sojin, also saying that he was very unlucky. The man grinned because to go directly into a prison that was built by the powerful and was 7,000 meters above the ground, Gehenna for his first crime was the worst thing that could happen. Finished with Sojung, he went to the others, asking them to raise their heads. The young man was not happy, for this was not how it was supposed to go. He thought about the fact that normal students in these worlds were living happily ever after. So shouldn't this life be brighter and easier than what he was going through? And so, standing handcuffed and with a magical collar, Sojin thought about what his life would be like now. He couldn't believe that he would be imprisoned for the rest of his life, until his death. A short while later, the prisoners lined up in a row in front of the warden. She greeted the prisoners, calling them assholes, also asking them to call her warden. As she looked at the prisoners, she bluntly stated that she felt like throwing up when she looked at them. She was surprised, because looking at this garbage, she noticed that none of them repented or regretted their sins. The overseer stated that this is what they are, calling them a cancer on society. Anyway, she asked them to open their eyes and face reality. The warden mentioned some personalities, for example, a high school student ruining everything around with his powers, or the general of the demon army, a crazy vampire looking for revenge. All of them, none of them could escape from this prison. And among the prisoners gathered here, none of them could escape either. And at that very moment, she looked at Sojin, and the young man noticed the warden's gaze. But he didn't understand why she was looking at him specifically. She moved closer to him, calling him the crazy warrior she was interested in. At that moment, there was despair on Sojung's face because she had chosen him. As she left, the warden asked them not to cross her path or she might even kill someone. As the warden was leaving, one of the prisoners said something and she noticed it. She asked for an answer, and everyone shouted yes. But the man with the blue skin said about the fucking break. And in the same second, the warden's foot was already on the place where the blue-skinned man was standing, thus crushing him, leaving only blue liquid. As it turned out, the girl had forgotten to tell something. The reason she was chosen to be the warden was because of her power. She explained to the prisoners that if they lived quietly in Gehenna, everything would be fine. Maybe, looking at them with a cold stare, she wondered if anyone wanted to die just like that. With everything done with, the warden decided to start with the confessions made by the prisoners for their crimes. And the first one was the warrior Kim Sojin. We return to the moment when the masked man cut off Sojin's ear and then asked the young man if he was the one who killed Princess Natanya. But no matter how hard the executioner tried to torture Sojin, the young man did not want to admit his guilt. The warden was sure that hallucinations worked, but something had gone wrong. In that case, she speculated that perhaps it was because of his willpower. No matter how many times the young man was tortured, Sojin would not admit his guilt, repeating words of innocence time after time. At the last moment when Sojin shouted that he was not guilty, a blue lightning bolt suddenly appeared that released him from the ball of hallucination, which also startled the executioner and the warden. Falling to his knees, Sojin couldn't understand what had just happened. Looking at his fingers, he was pleased to see that they industry back. In addition, his ears were perfectly fine as well. The warden then explained that it was a skill called hallucination, which was what Sojin had been tortured with. But still, she couldn't believe that the young man had freed himself so easily. She assumed that Sojung had an unusual skill, and then asserted that Sojung had the ability to accumulate. In that case, the masked man thought that it wasn't just because of that ability. The masked man assumed that it was only because they had weakened the magic impairment, since they needed the hallucinations to affect his brain. At the time, Sojin couldn't believe that he was being tortured by hallucinations, and on top of that, they started doing it from day one. He called them crazy, asking if people didn't have rights in this world. The girl looked away at the same moment and began to tell the story that in the past, there was a race with two horns here. They all lived in a small village. It was an ordinary village with a population of 300 people. A very quiet village. But one day, a man came from the land. He was a warrior who had traveled through the world. The girl told of that day, 275 inhabitants died. That warrior skill was called God Mode. It allowed him to use commands like cheats in games. But at one point, the girl just ripped off his limbs and left only his head. The girl asked Sojin if he knew what was the last thing that guy said. Exit. That's what that guy said. The girl expressed her belief that all Earthlings treat their world like a toy. Because of that, their world was now chaos. The girl thought that all Earthlings could kill people and treat it so easily. And when they raped them, they justified it by saying they just wanted to get closer. The warden asked Sojin if his heart was broken when he killed the second princess. But Sojin kept saying that he didn't kill her, and that the whole thing was nothing more than a false accusation. Sejun wondered what he would get out of killing her. That's why he doesn't understand why it happened to him. In that case, the girl decided to hit the young man since he didn't understand anything yet. She decided to explain something important to Sojung. The most important rule of Gehenna is that the accused admits his crime. Looking at Sojin with an exasperated look, she explained that it didn't matter to her whether Sojin was guilty or not. It wasn't her job to uncover the truth. After all, Gehenna is a correctional facility. The warden further explained that she didn't care if he was guilty or not, as it was her job to correct and teach him. She welcomed warrior Kim Sojung to their world before punching him and then sent him into a knockout. Soon Sojun woke up in his cell. Sojun didn't know what to think or do, because his life was not going to be easy, and this world was no different from the Earth. The only difference from this world is that in his home world, at least he had family. But here, no family, no friends. All that's left is loneliness. At that moment, Sojun raised his head in tears and saw the second princess Natanya looking at him with a piercing gaze. Sojun didn't understand how this happened, but Natanya only smiled and asked the young man, "Does Sojun wish to be freed from this place?" "My dear warrior." Sojun didn't understand what was going on here. Was it really just an illusion? It didn't feel like an illusion, though, as everything looked real. The young man reached out to Natanya and wondered if she was alive. After all, he was sure the princess was dead after what he had seen. Though Sojun didn't understand how it could have happened or how the princess could be here, Sojun was very happy to see her, that she was still alive. The young man grabbed her shoulders, realizing that now he would definitely be free of the false accusation. Then he asked Princess Natanya to let him out of here. Natanya, sighing heavily, regretfully explained to Sojun that she was unable to prove his innocence. Sojun questioned her in surprise as to what all this meant. Why? A red lightning bolt appeared, and the princess explained that there were several reasons. At that moment, the girl glowed with a bright red light and fire horns appeared on her head. This blinded the young man a bit, but then he saw a very different Natanya, who summarized why she couldn't help Sojun. "She's dead." Sojun couldn't understand how that was even possible. In that case, Natanya told about the so-called etheric form, where the soul is the core and the body is the mana. Ordinary people are not able to see her unless that person is from the earth. Plus, she has enough mana to use her skills. The princess then asked Sojun and asked about the most important thing, if Sojun remembered the face of the real culprit. Sojun thought about it and tried to remember the face of the culprit, but unfortunately he doesn't remember it. Thinking back to the remaining 3 summoned warriors, he knows that they don't remember anything either. It's as if some of the memories have been cut out like a piece of paper. In that case, Natanya affirmatively let the young man know that not only had they infiltrated the nation's most important building and killed the princess, but they had also escaped, blaming Sojun for everything. Therefore, Natanya refused to publicly announce that she was alive, since they have no information about the real culprit. Sighing heavily, Sojun asked with a sullen face, what should he do then? He grudgingly spoke up about how he couldn't do anything like that. But the princess asked him if he wanted to escape. Nervous, Sojun explained that he would eventually be executed, and he was just risking his life. Unable to contain his emotions, Sojun expressed to Natanya that he was called into this world against his will and then imprisoned where he was tortured. The young man was tired of this idle chatter and asked the princess to tell him the truth. He asked if he had any chance of getting out of here. Natanya took Sojun's hand off his shoulder and replied that she could not say that there was no way out, but that there was. Sojun's world seemed to turn upside down at that moment, for he had hope of getting out of this place. But the princess only said that there was a way out of the prison at 7,000 meters, from which even a man with the ability to shrink could not get out. After a while, Sojun was sitting on the torture chair again, where the executioner asked the young man to repeat what he had just said. He removed the blindfold from his mouth so that he could speak. Soon, gnashing his teeth and with tears in his eyes, Sojun finally confessed to killing Princess Natanya and her court mages. At that moment, Sojun felt terrible, because after 2 days of endless torture by hallucinations, he had to confess to a murder he did not commit. The prison staff finally heard the confession from Sojun, and one of them can finally go back to his past job. The remaining masked man explained that the man behind him would tell them what Sojung had in store for him next. He introduced the girl, whose name was Amber. She was from the patrol team. Sojun asked what kind of patrol group. Amber greeted the young man, expressing her joy that she had met the one who killed the princess. She even laughed at him, for Sojun looks much stupider than she had heard. Soon she took off the young man's handcuffs, thinking he was uncomfortable with them, and it was clear from Sojun's look that he was relieved. She was glad to meet him, also expressing that Sojun was glad to meet her. The executioner asked Amber not to chat with the prisoner and to send him to his assigned location as soon as possible. Sojun looked down and saw that his hands were cuffed again, and then Amber simply grabbed the young man by his clothes and dragged him along. Sojun wondered what was going on here. The girl was surprised that the young man had not been told yet, but she stunned Sojun by telling him that he was finished. She explained that the most important thing in Gehenna is the criminal's confession of his crime. Those who come here are scum, first and foremost. so it's not clear why they would resist and force themselves to be tortured like that. Sojin asked, so if he had said yes right away, none of this would have happened? And Amber confirmed the guess, since the torture would have stopped right away since everyone else does that. In the same second, the girl's look changed. She explained that once the perpetrator confessed, there was no taking back his words, and that scared Sojung somewhat, but Amber asked him to forget about it, since it wouldn't be good if the trash started falling out of the basket. Soon the girl asked to talk about something less depressing. She repeated the fact that she was Amber from the patrol group. She explained that the patrol group was made up of prison guard members with the highest combat skills, which were comparable to Chit's. She told Sojin that she was in charge of the section where he would be sitting, but she warned him that if Sojin became hysterical, she would kill him immediately. Soon they came to a door where armed guards stood. Stepping over the threshold of the door, Amber wanted to show him something scary, judging by Sojin's look. It was a place where there was a large cluster of capsules where people were placed. This was exactly what the execution in Gehenna was like. Sojin wondered if these people were being used as batteries, and Amber confirmed the hunch, calling it extraction. They drain their mana and extract skills from their bodies, from their shells. Humans are the most important resource here. The prisoners of Gehenna have special skills, that's reason enough to imprison them here. Amber also heard from the captain that Sojin has a special skill, so you could say she's saying all this to him out of the goodness of her heart. A little earlier, Natanya had asked Sojin what he planned to do. The young man asked about another way. Does it exist? In that case, the princess explained that the death sentence cannot be avoided. Besides, since Sojin is already off the land, he can't hire a lawyer either. And escaping from prison was simply impossible. And Sojin himself understood that. Looking at the desperate young man, Natanya decided to tell him a story to motivate him. She told him that from the moment Sojin set foot on this earth, time had stopped in his world, which immediately shocked the young man. The princess went on to explain that, for example, a month had passed since Sojin had come to this world. So in Earth time, a month has also passed. If a month had already passed in Earth time, wouldn't Sojung's parents look for him? This news made the young man angry, so he grabbed Natanya and angrily told her that she was the one who had called him here. In that case, Natanya asked what was Sojin going to do? Just sit here and do nothing? And then asserted that the warrior already knew the answers. She gave him a choice, either surrender and rot in prison, or escape and return to Earth. She expressed confidence if Sojin decided to escape, she could help him do so. Sojin grits his teeth and lets the princess go and agrees to her help. But lastly, he says that he doesn't trust her one bit, but if he can escape from this world, he doesn't care. And the princess was pleased with this wise decision. On the training ground, the man only gives Amber 75 points. But she was not happy, as the man with glasses was really thinking about killing her. And the man made no secret that he did, so he only gives her 75 points. Amber sighed heavily and plopped down on the ground and thanked her captain for mentoring her. The man repeated to the girl that he really liked her foresight skill, but explained that her body still couldn't keep up with her eyes. And Amber's only weakness is her ability to focus on only one target during battle. Amber spotted a teddy bear on the ground near her, and she just realized her weakness. In that case, the man explained to her, something that you need to know your strengths and weaknesses. Otherwise, who knows, this bear might turn into a sword in a real battle. Amber immediately got up from the ground, asking the captain if he liked bears, and then thought about getting him more toys. But the captain angrily declined such a gift. Soon Amber noticed an oddity, asking the captain why the warden was here. But the man himself did not realize it. He only knows that she was called by her superiors, and thought that he should have joined them today. Then the girl wondered if the fact that neither the captain nor the warden would be there meant that she would not be there. And the man confirmed the hunch, but it was somehow suspicious to him, since they are called in the moment the Sojin warrior surrenders, and how the inner workings of Gehenna become public knowledge. The man expressed his belief that a rat had infiltrated Gehenna. Sojin stood in some line and thought about how today was the day the escape plan was supposed to happen, but still he couldn't believe it. After all, looking around, Sojin noticed about 20 guards at the back entrance. Moreover, they were all armed, and not just with swords like Fantasy Worlds, but with real firearms, which the young man didn't expect to see here. In that case, Natanya explained that it was a standard rifle powered by a small magical engine. It fires 50 times a minute and so 19 times. The young man was surprised to see the princess next to him, who had appeared out of nowhere. He only wanted to ask her something, but she asked him to keep quiet. Even though no one but Sojin can see her, he should still be careful and listen only to the princess. She told the young man that in about half an hour the inspection will be over. There will be an ambush when they take Sojung to his cell. So she asked the young man to be ready. Soon he was already at the guard's side, who asked him to bend down to remove the device from his neck so they could check the strength of his skill as well as its purpose. The guard warned his comrades about Sojung. If he suddenly got close to the guards, he ordered them to kill Sojung immediately. After the force restraint device was done away with, Sojun was asked to walk forward. As he walked forward, the young man was visibly nervous, and then he saw the massive structure in front of him from which the prisoners were being led out. A bald man beckoned Sojun over to him, calling him by the code name 1317099. At this point Netanya appeared, explaining to the young man that they would now be testing his skill set to get the young man to work on something. The princess also inquired if Sojun had used his skill. She explained that you have to shout out the name of your skill to activate it. And afterward, imagine that you have another finger and flick it. After the instruction, she sent Sojun to check his skill, and in the meantime, she would wait for him here since there were sensors inside. Walking up the stairs, the young man thought about his skillet. An accumulation skill, when you think about it, Sojun didn't even know how to use it. Through the gramophone, he was ordered to stand in the center, saying that Sojun's skillet was the accumulation skill. And now the young man must use his power on the dummy in front of him. Sojun was surprised to see a dummy appear out of nowhere. Plus, he doesn't even know how strong his skill is. After putting his hand forward and saying the name of his skill, nothing happened. Therefore, he was ordered to stop idling and do things quickly. Sojun was displeased as these people can't realize that this is his first time. But now he realized that his skill wasn't for long distances, and it couldn't be activated by shouting. This time, Sojun came closer and once again put his hand forward in front of the mannequin, and later imagined that he had another finger. After that, the young man's hand began to sparkle with a blue color, and after a click, his skill finally activated. Sojun's eye was covered in blue color, and soon he saw something like an inventory like in various online RPG games. In addition, there was now a mannequin in his inventory. But what was even more surprising was that the inventory was seemingly endless. But unfortunately, the person who spoke into the gramophone was expecting Sojun to have some useless skill he hadn't even heard of. And from the looks of it, it's some ordinary skill that can only store things. Looking at his hand, Sojun knew for sure that it was a normal inventory like in most games or comics. In manhwa, heroes usually have some sort of super cool ability, but leaving out the details, there was something the young man cared about. When Sojun had first summoned him to this world, the princess had looked at his skill and smiled. Looking at Netanya, he was certainly embarrassed, but not disappointed. Still, he wondered, maybe no one had heard of the skillet before? Or maybe Sojun didn't know something. The young man was sure that there was something about this skillet that he had no idea about. Sojun ordered number A317099 to put the mannequin in place, and then they would finish testing his ability. But to his dismay, Sojun had no idea how he could choose something from the list, because it was not even possible to choose something here. The prison worker didn't understand what was wrong with this guy. Was this really his first time using his skill? And the cat girl confirmed his guess, saying that it was his first time. The worker turned around and looked at the girl, shocked at not understanding what she was doing here. And when he tried to pull out his weapon, the girl had already stabbed him several times, causing him to collapse to the ground in terrible pain. The redhead asked the girl to stop, but she only smiled and told him to do it, and afterward finished off the employee. This bloody scene was seen by the other workers as well, ordering her to be killed as soon as possible. But it seems the cat girl was enjoying it all, since she started licking blood like crazy. Sojun wondered to Netanya what the big deal was. After all, the young man thought that the plan would be executed after the test. Netanya herself did not understand what was going on, as she did not know the girl who had attacked the guards, and this was not part of the plan at all. And underneath all those explosions, the girl was happily running around the enclosure, clearly up to no good. 10 minutes later, one of the workers decided to snack on a delicious candy bar, much to the other workers' surprise, since he eats all the time. The redhead coughed and told his comrade that he had just been cut while playing. Noticing this, the green-eyed guy saw that his comrade also had a cold, saying that there must be some kind of epidemic right now. After a moment, the red-haired man felt much worse, as black liquid was flowing out of his mouth. His companion immediately decided to use some kind of phone in his ear to call for help. But he himself began to feel sick and also started coughing up black liquid. When both workers were almost out, someone from the body of the red-haired man ordered to go outside, and then appeared an unknown entity that was completely in white. It was unhappy that it had to be in that stinking guy's stomach, and then asked how Doffel was doing. Doffel voiced his contentment at the empty complaints, noting that Epiko was quite determined. While in the skill check building, Sojin is finally released and asked to move on, and quickly. Soon we notice the same girl who recently blew all the guards to smithereens. She looked down where one of the guards was casting a shadow. It was there that she saw an entity in white peeking out quietly from the guard's shadow. Smiling, she signaled that it was time to begin. Her plan was simple. One would just have to come in unnoticed and break through. She approached the guards saying that she really needed to use the restroom, asking them to let her go for a bit. But the guard thought this girl was rather suspicious, so before taking her to the restroom, he wanted to examine her first, which the girl didn't agree with at all. Because the girl started to refuse, the guard thought that the girl was up to something, so he ordered her to kneel down. This confused the girl a bit, making her dizzy. And unable to think of anything better to do, the girl yelled out that they had been exposed, so it was time to attack. The guard was puzzled, but in the same second, he and his colleagues were pierced by sharp shadowy spikes, as well as releasing the girl with ears from the handcuffs. And as soon as the girl decided to run, she was followed by one of the guards who was very fast, even if his comrades had just been killed in front of him. And he runs after her just to attack her. The girl smiled, for that was how one justified risking one's life. The man had already prepared to use his skill on the girl who was trying so hard to escape. Soon she noticed the collar that suppresses mana, but she didn't know how to get to it. But all her thoughts were interrupted by shots flying in her direction, which later made a big bang. The guards thought it was over, but from behind the smoke came a cat girl named Epiko, who enjoyed the show, finding it very exciting. Soon they opened fire again with all their guns, but after a closer look they were surprised to see that the girl was unharmed. There was some sort of circular shield around the girl, and the girl was a step away from death if it wasn't for that restraining magical collar. Anyway, the guard noticed something glowing around the girl, plus the space was warping. Looking closer he realized what it was, so he ordered his comrades to retreat as she was going to shoot at them. The girl put her hands forward like some kind of JoJo reference, and then called out the name of her skill purification. After which the glowing bullets were sent back, hitting her enemies. She walked over to the dead and grabbed her knife, with a manic look, determined to find our Kim Sojung. Wait, what do you want to do with this guy? Soon Sojin watched the horrible scene as the crazy girl interrupted the crowd of guards, and was currently resting on the floor as she was very tired. In addition, she wasn't happy that her comrade was standing aside and not helping. But the unknown entity in white explained that someone had to watch over everything. Sojin didn't understand who these people were. He knew very well that they were not part of Natanya's plan. But in any case, Sojin understood. There's not one, but two parties here who want to get him out. Free him from false accusation and prison. And for Natanya, this situation doesn't seem so good. Epiko approached the young man and asked him not to be afraid and to come to her, because they came here to get him out. Plus, she expressed that she doesn't bite. Oh, I really wouldn't want her to bite me. That girl is just crazy. In that case, Natanya gave the okay to go after them. Epiko was pleased, but asked her not to worry in her presence. The white entity wasn't happy, since the girl was flirting with whoever she had to again, and they didn't have time for that, and they had to leave in 3 minutes. But Epiko knew it herself, calling her comrade a sucker. Either way, the girl hoped Sojin would follow her quietly. Sojin looked down and saw a pile of corpses that made him feel uneasy. Epiko laughed and asked him if corpses made him shiver. But to him they were not corpses but real people. Sojin came to the conclusion that it was better to go back. At that moment, Epiko held out her hand, saying that her mom used to do this when she was little. One should just close their eyes, take her hand, and follow her, expressing confidence that it would be a little easier that way. But judging by Sojung's face, it wouldn't get any easier that way. After all, the young man is already scared to death, and this crazy woman is standing there smiling. White Essence didn't like that this Epiko was playing around with everything, and they had every second precious. With a chuckle, he ordered Amber not to come any closer. But the girl couldn't understand how he noticed her, since she didn't even touch his shadow. The White Essence explained that he could sense everything around his shadow and then asked, "Do you underestimate other people's skills?" But Amber explained that this was the first time she had encountered such a thing. The man in white tried to throw a punch at Amber, but to the girl his movements seemed very clear. She knew that this punch wasn't real, because the shadow behind her back, that's where the truth lies. And the body was just a vessel, and it wasn't real either. With a furious look, Amber informed her opponent that his real body was the shadows on the floor. The man immediately informed Epiko that this girl has the demon eye skill. She can see the movement of other people's mana. Soon, Amber made a swipe with her machete, thus splitting the man in two, much to the surprise of the others. Laughing, the girl expressed her confidence that she would only have to deal with one intruder. When Amber was done with the man who was controlling the shadows, she decided to continue her fight with the others. Sojin remembered that he had seen this girl a little while ago, and she seemed to be a strange but dangerous opponent. Amber was sure that, judging from the information, this was the work of a traitor within Gehenna, but she didn't see how that was possible. In any case, she wondered, who was this intruder? And looking at the princess's soul, she assumed it was something else. She assumed that there are several groups that are trying to rescue Kim Sojung, but she didn't understand the reason why. Natanya knew that if the person wasn't from Earth, no one else could see her, which meant this Lamia could see her through the magical distortion. It pissed her off that this snake had the demon eye skill. Taking out her machete, Amber suggested forgetting about Kim Sojung for now, and then rushed forward next to Sojung to attack Ipiko, bringing her weapon behind her back. Ipiko wasn't prepared for this, because the snake strikes at such an angle that it's impossible to dodge. In that case, she assumed it was because Amber was a snake. Amber struck with her weapon, but Ipiko dodged in time. The snake girl charged her weapon with dark energy, turning it black and red. Time after time, Amber struck at Ipiko, but she dodged like a cat, never giving her a chance to hurt herself. Well, if you want to live, you have to be able to spin like a cat. After another attack, Amber realized that her attacks were not reaching her opponent and assumed it was a defense skill, but then realized it was a spatial manipulation skill. Ipiko looked at Amber and was sure that she had sped up. Because of her demonic eye, she could see Ipiko's footsteps. The moment the shards flew in different directions, Sojin activated his skill, which surprised him a lot, as the shards that flew towards him were thrown back. Looking at them, he couldn't realize how fast they were. After all, humans aren't capable of such things. Natanya was also shocked by this fight, suggesting that it was like a warrior's handbook, where you could familiarize yourself with skills and magic. She expressed her belief that a warrior should do this as well. She thought it could be called pre-training. The fierce battle between Amber and Ipiko continued, each of them using their skills. Ipiko knew she had to finish as soon as possible, preferably in 2 minutes before Gehenna's reinforcements arrived. The cat girl asked Amber, did she have no mana left? At that moment, Lamia took a big swing of her machete and smashed the huge pod, but Ipiko once again dodged that attack. The fight continued and Amber noticed the cat using her skill. She begins to attract shards and then manipulates them, thus launching them at her opponent. But like Ipiko, Amber's defense was excellent, keeping herself from getting hurt. Ipiko assumed that the ponytail could see everything, which pissed her off. Amber finally realized that her opponent's skill was space distortion. As she ran away again, Ipiko noticed that the snake was spending mana like crazy. But still, if you spent that much mana, you could die. But Ipiko thought that the snake was using mana very efficiently and had a lot of power. Amber once again enhanced her weapon, making it visually larger and more deadly, which of course Ipiko didn't like, because if that thing hit her, it would be the end of her. Amber made a cut that split the room in two, which really freaked Sojung out. He couldn't understand what the monstrous and abnormal strokes were. The young man remembered Natanya's words well. While Ember from the mobile team was performing a series, Ipiko would use magic and skills to a minimum. In that case, the young man wondered if it was an innate difference in strength, and Natanya confirmed the guess, but added that they also have a difference in the types of skills. The princess explained that the spatial skills took a lot of mana, and the snake girl's demonic eye skill consumed almost no mana. Moreover, unlike Amber, who had to last for one fight, the young man realized that he and Ipiko still had to get out of Gehenna. In that case, he realized that they were at an extreme disadvantage. Therefore, Sojin wished to join the fight and asked Natanya to tell him how to control the skill. But the princess thought Sojin had a problem with logic, since he hadn't even learned how to release mana yet. Sojin objected since he has the storage skill, but he knows very well that it's not just an inventory. Natanya figured that, at the end of this battle, he would either run away or bury himself. Looking at the pile of corpses on the ground, the princess asked if Sejun wanted to get his hands dirty. Sojin argued that he didn't want to, but since he was already in the center of events, he had no other choice. And that even surprised Natanya. The princess explained that the detection skills, and especially the demon eye, only allow you to see mana for the rest of your life. Everything in this world, even objects, contains some mana in them, and the wielders of the demon eye can see it. Meanwhile, Amber finally realized that Catgirl is trying to exhaust her. She's blocking her attacks with weak power, and this skill that the Catgirl uses can't distort objects. After realizing the whole situation, The girl took a few swings of her machete and then finally wounded Apiko, who was very surprised. Amber asked her rival if this was her limit, but Apiko couldn't say anything. Since that was the case, Amber thought it was time to die. Smiling and then hitting the ground, Apiko objected. After all, the biggest advantage and disadvantage of the demon eye is that it sees everything at once. The brain has to assimilate a huge amount of information, which can interfere with combat and daily life. Therefore, the owners of the demonic eye, their own hand imposed restrictions on it. At that moment, a bunch of rocks flew towards Amber, but the girl saw their trajectory. She mocked her rival, saying that such projectiles were useless against her. After all, her demonic eye allows her to read orbits. Bringing the machete behind her back, she was sure Apiko was finished. But Apiko explained to Amber that her opponent had minimized her readouts for the sake of the fight, calculating that she couldn't see the mana of ordinary objects. At that moment, debris from the ceiling began to fall on Amber, thus pinning her to the ground. Apiko revealed her plan, that she wasn't aiming her rocks at Amber. She was aiming her rocks not at Amber, but at a weak part of the ceiling that was begging to be broken. Meanwhile, Natanya asked Sojin if he thought he could do anything to help Apiko, and the young man answered no. But still, he wanted to try. Once Amber fell once, the restrictions from her demonic eye would be removed, and it wouldn't be possible to also attack her again. The large amount of information would start to distract her in battle, but minimal restrictions will remain. A way to deal with someone out of sight. Sojin thought about Amber. Does her demon eye skill have a weakness that reads everything? Lying under the ruins, Amber recognized her defeat and that Apiko had more experience and flair than her. She had lost, with several broken bones and a hole in her stomach. But she looked up and said she had a couple more moves. This alerted Apiko, and Amber's demonic eye glowed on her forehead, whereupon she activated a skill reset. She got out from under the rubble and pounced on Apiko. To reset a skill literally means to take on a huge load. So to speak, to increase the effectiveness of the skill. Rebooting the demon eye meant that the brain would operate at its lowest power, but the field of vision would expand manifold. Amber estimated that she had about 15 seconds. With her current field of vision, she could see a little into the future. She hit Apiko with great force, causing her to cough up blood. Afterward, she struck with her tail and sealed the cat girl into the wall. As she approached Apiko, who was now on the floor, Amber realized she had another 10 seconds to spare. After the reboot subsided, she would lose her vision for a while. Apiko was already thinking that she should do the reboot as well, but then they wouldn't be able to handle what was coming next. In that case, when Amber wanted to touch the girl, Apiko used spatial distortion, which surprised Amber, after which both of them were thrown aside. Even though Apiko reflexively extended the space distortion, she still took a pretty big damage. As she tried to get away from the snake and catch her breath, she bumped into Amber, who was about to deliver her final blow. She explained that she had seen the shape and direction of the spatial distortion, even the angle at which Apiko flew, and it was easy for her, which meant Amber had won. But at the moment Amber was about to hit Apiko, Sojin intervened with his power and placed the same dummy he had placed in his inventory back in the evaluation room into the snake girl's body. Amber couldn't understand what was going on here. Looking at Sojin, he explained that when an item stored by a skill is removed, the item in the same location disappears. Natanya kept wondering what Sojin was thinking, assuming that was why he was being quiet all the time. Sojin realized that the demon eye's vulnerability was concentration. Amber couldn't face two targets at the same time. Natanya was amazed at how quickly the warrior adapted. Amber realized what the demon eye's weakness was, but she couldn't fix it. Falling down, she said that she had failed in her task. I don't think Amber is actually such a bad person. She's just confused. Sojin looked at the girl's dead body and realized that he had killed someone. However, he realized that it was his choice. When he decided to run, his path was drenched in blood. The young man realized that he had to do everything he could to return to Earth and escape from this world. As the girl was leaving, she noticed that the guards had already left and they could exit through the same entrance she came in through. Apiko looked at Sojin and asked if anything was bothering him. But Sojin replied that he wasn't, and said he was just picking up his gun. Soon the young man followed the girl. She told him that she had freed the other prisoners before entering the testing room. She suggested that they were probably busy with the others right now. In the meantime, they would make their way across the road to the retreat. Sojin wondered who they were. He really didn't understand why they would risk their lives to save him. Apiko couldn't explain, but said Sojin was the key. The young man was surprised. What key are we talking about? He looked at Netanya, who somehow darkened and lowered her head. Ipiko explained that there was something very important locked away from them, and only Sojin could help them discover it. Looking at the princess, the young man saw either fear or embarrassment in her face, which surprised him greatly. The cat called out to Sojin, telling him that there was probably total chaos going on in the first floors. So she told the young man to get out another way. She pointed her finger upward and suggested he go upstairs, then took Sojung under her arm and used her strength to jump up. The young man extended his arm forward to use the skill and place the trapdoor in the ceiling into his inventory. Upon landing, the girl was very happy that Sojin was getting used to his new skills so quickly. Although Sojin had only used it a couple times, he was already used to it. The girl explained that 5 minutes had already passed, so there would be armed guards on the upper floors as well. So she asked the young man not to relax. She ordered Sojin to run after her and to keep doing so even when they would break through the barriers. Netanya looked at Sojin and went into her space, much to the young man's surprise. The cat girl didn't understand why he was standing still, so she took him by his clothes and dragged him behind her. She explained that they would disconnect from the riot zone. But if Sojin disconnects, neither she nor he will be able to get out. The young man didn't understand what disconnection was being talked about. She explained that it was a skill that affected time and space. Gehenna's mobile patrols also possessed such skills. At the same time, the mobile patrol had already dealt with some of the rioters. One of the prisoners tried to resist them using her powers. She launched steel spears at her opponents. A white-haired guy with glasses, surprised, stopped the spears with his skill. He asked why the place was so gloomy. His subordinate said that all the guards had already evacuated. In such a situation, the man with glasses ordered to move towards the harbor. He stretched his hand forward and said that these people were the reason for this whole mess. If they continued like this, he would have no other choice. At this moment, one of the prisoners had already started to transform into something demonic. It tried to attack the man in white, but the man used a reset of his abilities and sealed the monster in a huge black cube, leaving only its claws. He was walking down the corridor and asked the guards to increase security measures since he wouldn't be able to do anything after the reboot. On the phone that was in his ear, he reported that the spatial disconnection operation was complete. He then asked about the work of the other two people. The man in winter clothes said that they were also finished. Sitting on the mountain of corpses, he offered to organize the removal of the bodies. He also asked if it could be a coincidence that the warden and commander were not present at the incident. The man in glasses was sure that it was not an accident but a carefully planned move. The hooded man realized that the rumors of a traitor in their midst were true. He asked Cecilia if there was any information about other escaped criminals. The girl replied that there were several locations in Sector B, 3F, Corridor 3C, Sector C2F, Corridor 4A, Sector C4F, Corridor 8B, and the guards' rest area. It seemed strange to her, and she assumed that someone had used a skill to confuse the information. They soon reached a location where guards stood in their way. Ipiko suggested they avoid the battle as she had already used too much mana. The young man asked what they should do now. The girl suggested using the young man's skill to make a hole in the wall and make an escape. One of the guards recognized Ipiko and reported that Doffel had already checked all the corridors. Ipiko and Sojin were surprised by this news. Ipiko hadn't expected to see Doffel, and Sojin didn't understand what was happening. Ipiko explained that Doffel was her coworker who could control infected targets throughout the day. It turned out that the virus in the guards' bodies had reported that all corridors leading to the exit had been checked. However, it erroneously reported the location of Kim Sojung, so it asked to hurry as it needed to be in place in 2 minutes. He also asked if White was dead. Walking through the guards, the infected man handed Ipiko what she'd asked for. Sojin asked what it was. Ipiko told him that it was a magical device to dodge Gehenna's automatic fire. She then asked for it to be hidden. After reaching the right room, Ipiko informed that there was a hovercraft right above the place. Because of the sheer size of Gehenna and its location in airspace, for support, every building has such a vessel on the topmost floor. She was sure it was the only way out of Gehenna. Besides, naturally, other prisoners can't get in here. Sojin was full of hope that they would finally get out of here, get out of this damn prison. But still the young man did not understand what would happen to Netanya. Why had she left so suddenly? But the musings were interrupted by the hooded man, realizing that they were controlling the minds of the guards. Like a virus, it spreads and activates after a while. That's why reliable information was so hard to get. The man said he would destroy them with a miniature missile. He would also suggest to the warden that she put up a magical mental barrier device. Ipiko called out to Sojin, but the hooded man had already attacked the young man, aiming for his head. But Sojin blocked that attack, or to be more precise, he placed that small missile in his inventory. This surprised the man, assuming that Sojin was the one with the storage skill. He was surprised that the young man was even able to store the projectile flying at him. Sojin looked at his face and noticed a drop of sweat that had frozen. The man confirmed the young man's words. He could freeze and kill anyone in his path. A little earlier, a man with the ice ability had approached an executioner named Caleb. He introduced himself as Isaac from the second floor. Caleb was surprised to see the man who was in charge of the lower floors, so he asked Isaac to continue. Isaac heard that Caleb had tortured Kim Sojung, and the executioner confirmed the hunch. The frosty man explained that he had read the report on Kim Sojung and thought there was something strange about it. After all, he had killed Princess Natanya and the palace technicians in the blink of an eye, and it was very strange that no one remembered that moment. Moreover, according to Kim Sojung's claims, there was someone else there. In such a case, Caleb explained that there was strong evidence that Kim Sejun was the culprit, namely the mana traces. The executioner held his finger up and purple energy came out of it. He explained that mana is like an indelible fingerprint. Its color and wavelength are different for everyone. The mana trace in the goddess hourglass matched Kim Sojung's. So Caleb was convinced that Sejun was just a crazy killer talking nonsense. If that wasn't the case, he wouldn't have been assigned here. Isaac understood and thought Sejun was just a common killer. At this moment, Isaac tried to attack Sojin again, but the young man once again repelled the scumbag's attack. As the dart fell to the ground, it began to release a chill that made Sojin feel sick. Ipiko immediately ran up to him, wondering if the young man was all right. Barely touching the boy, she was shocked, for Sojin was as cold as ice. Half of his face had already started to freeze, and blood was flowing from his eye, causing Sojin terrible pain. Isaac held up his ice dart and explained that he could kill the young man without even touching him, and soon threw a charge at the couple again. But Ipiko dodged safely along with Sojin. This surprised Isaac, and soon the girl and the boy disappeared into space. Isaac thought it was some sort of conspiracy of the empire or kingdom. Although it sounded absurd, Gehenna should be a neutral territory. He summoned all his charges that were on the floor, thus surrounding himself. Isaac noticed a transport on the right side that supposedly held prisoners. In that case, he decided to test the theory and launched a charge there. But as it turned out, he did it so that they couldn't escape on that ship. After all, the transportation was now damaged. At the same time, Sojin and Ipiko were hiding behind the walls, and the young man did not understand what kingdom and empire were we talking about. Could it be that they were the ones who wanted to free him? The young man thought, but he quickly dismissed the thought as ridiculous and ridiculous. Ipiko called out to the boy, saying that she needed to save some mana just in case, so she wouldn't be able to use any more than she should. This alarmed the young man, as he didn't know how they would manage now. In any case, Ipiko felt that from now on they should travel without using mana. After all, to get to a certain place, she would need to be well rested. The girl was very angry and tired. After all, they were up against two mobile groups, which was not part of the plan. Sojin looking back, he really didn't realize if Natanya had left him or just hid. But one thing he knew for sure, now he had to fight instead of Ipiko. But could he win against Isaac? That was something the young man didn't know. Soon the infected captured Isaac, who was about to launch his charge. He was surprised that they were able to touch his ice weapon, but still expressed confidence that they couldn't defeat him only in numbers. The surviving infected told Ipiko and Sojung that the non-magical transportation would begin now and it was already charged. Isaac, holding his projectile in his hands, figured he wouldn't miss it for anything. So when Ipiko and Sojin were already on the stairs to the ship, Isaac put his hand behind his head to throw his projectile, but he was immediately grabbed by the infected. But unfortunately, the ice projectile was already thrown. At this point, Ipiko expected the end to come, but Sojin thrust his arm forward, activated his skill and placed the projectile in his inventory. I don't know about you, but to me this ability is very powerful. After all, you can literally steal someone else's attack, as long as it has some sort of shell, of course. Soon, the infected crowd piled onto Isaac, who shouted that Kim Sojin wouldn't be able to escape him. He expressed that whoever it was, kingdom or empire, they just wanted to use him, so he asked Sojin not to think that it was all for his own good. After all, it doesn't matter which side Sojin chooses, as his future will be hell. Sojin was silent for a moment, and then gritted his teeth and shouted that he didn't care. He just wants to get out of here. Sojin was so angry that these bastards were torturing people, and Ipiko noticed the young man's horrified look. The young man thought this world would be a better place without something like this. But Isaac couldn't understand how Kim Sojin could say such a thing, considering he had killed Princess Natanya. The young man had told everyone for the umpteenth time that he didn't kill the princess, but no one listened to him. Sojin was about to say something about Princess Natanya, but he was interrupted by Apiko, saying that this scumbag was stalling. She asked him to be calm, because it was time for them to leave. Sojin gave the scumbag a horrified look, but went inside the ship. Apiko, standing at the controls of the ship, explained that she understood that Sojin felt he had been treated unfairly. Apiko explained that she was on a mission and couldn't say much, but what she did want to tell him was that they couldn't rely on such things in the place they were headed. Apiko didn't know how comfortable the land was, but she asked Sojin to keep her mind unclouded. And when the infected was already opening the gate, Apiko also complimented that Sojin should always remain calm and collected. After all, it was better to kill than to be killed. Using skill and magic in battle is the basics. Apiko asked the young man to be more focused. After all this escape, so much effort had been put into making sure he wasn't killed. He was the key to everything. And it pained her to see Sojin start to snap at nothing. Soon one of the infected explained that the operation had succeeded, so he asked Apiko to leave. But Isaac was the only one who thought differently. He grabbed the infected and then simply froze them and tore them into icy chunks of meat. Sojin thought he was done with this scumbag, but Isaac wasn't willing to give up, so he immediately headed towards the ship. Apiko was annoyed with the man, as she didn't want to use the overload here, and when Isaac almost touched the ship, Apiko had to use the skill overload. At this point, the ship began to distort in space, so Isaac was unable to touch the ship to freeze it. He thought it was the distortion skill, but looking ahead he realized it was something else. Seeing a black hole at the end that sucked everything in, he realized that the girl was using the overload skill. And since Isaac knew it was the girl's last move, he shot forward. At this point, Apiko started vomiting blood, which startled Sojung. She also explained that the ship was on autopilot, and it would get them out of Gehenna. Apiko barely kept herself on her feet, asked Sojin to get the magical item she had asked her to hide, and then collapsed to the floor. It was necessary to act very quickly, but Sojin noticed a strange movement from above. Looking up, he saw a scumbag who was glad that the side effects from the overloaded skill had finally worked. Sojin knew something had to be done, so he activated his ability. Standing on the front window of the ship, Isaac explained about skill overload, that it wasn't just about overloading the skill itself. The more power, the more mana used. Depending on the skill, there can be other costs besides mana. And having to use them when mana isn't enough can be life-threatening. And those who use this method should be prepared for increased risk. If not used properly, there can be a kickback. Soon Isaac pulled out his projectile and explained that such a thing happened just like this. He started hitting the glass with his weapon and Sojin stood there watching the whole thing. As the glass began to crack, he ran towards Apiko. As he stood in front of her, he tried to use his skill, but the hoarding skill didn't work. It was then that Sojin assumed that he couldn't keep living things alive. Since the glass was almost broken, he had no other choice. He quickly searched for a place to hide the girl. He soon found a place for the parachutes, and afterwards sealed the girl in that place. Unfortunately for Sojung, the glass was broken and Isaac went downstairs, taking his cat hook. Isaac wondered if he should turn back to Gehenna, but quickly realized that Gehenna's automaton wasn't working. He was surprised that they had brought such contrived magical devices. Looking at the compartment below, Isaac considered Sojin to be nothing, calling him a worthless hero, so he thought he could do it alone. Isaac went downstairs and saw no one, but soon he noticed a weapon lying on the floor. In that case, he prepared his magic projectile and then launched it at that gun. At that moment, a huge crate fell behind him and almost crushed him, but Isaac safely dodged to the side. He was sure that the insolent man was hiding under the stairs, so he took out his magic projectile and decided to throw it there. But at that moment, a young man appeared behind him, who called his weapon into his hands at the same second. After firing, some of the bullets hit Isaac, but one bullet hit the magic projectile, creating a small explosion which caused Isaac to fly away, which surprised the young man. Isaac thought about the fact that even when Sojin shot so close, he only hit him twice, although he had thought Sojin was quite accurate before. He turned to the young man, saying that he had underestimated him, since before the scumbag had thought Sojin was a petty asshole who could just hide and take things out. Isaac reflected on the fact that Kim Sojung was fighting better than he expected, considering that he was being made a fool of. Soon Sojin hid behind a pillar and started shooting at Isaac, but the scumbag covered himself with chip boxes. Yeah, because chip boxes are the most armor-piercing boxes in the whole world. Anyway, in an attempt to do damage to Isaac, he used his hook to get to dodge, and then kicked the door and moved into another room. At this point, Sojin couldn't understand why shooting was so difficult. Isaac asked the young man to throw away his gun and walk in on him. Well yes, so you can kill him? Am I reading that right, Mr. Scrawny Head? As it turned out, he found a Pico, who was unconscious. Isaac asked the young man to stop and asked if they could talk. After all, if not, he might kill her. He also explained to Sojung that he had guessed where his comrade was hiding. After all, there was nowhere to hide in a couple seconds in such a small place except here. Isaac ordered Sojin to cast his gun away from the engine room and come closer, but warned him if Sojin jerked the wrong way, he would kill the girl instantly. Sojin thought it was funny. He wanted to say something about a Pico, but Isaac interrupted him, asking if she was the only one who knew the whole plan. But the young man didn't understand what was the big deal. In that case, Isaac proposed an idea. He would delay the day of Sojin's execution as much as possible. And since the Pico's information is important, it will help Gehenna, and if the young man is lucky, maybe he will avoid execution. Isaac realized that Sojin's plan had failed, so he asked bluntly, "Does Sojin agree?" In that case, with no other choice, the young man threw his weapon on the floor and raised his hands. Isaac was glad for this outcome, for he too wanted to end things as peacefully as possible. He ordered the young man to raise his hands and slowly kneel down, and if Sojin tried anything, the deal was off. He asked to surrender peacefully and everyone would be fine. Sojin sighed and holding his hands up, explained that he had no intention of doing anything to this world. He just wanted to return home. That's all. After saying these words, the young man activated his skill in a sudden movement, much to Isaac's incomprehension. He wondered what Sojin was doing, but the answer was as simple as possible. The young man with a burning blue eye explained to the brat that he was ending the negotiations. As the ship began to descend, the two men could barely stand on their feet. Isaac assumed that Sojin had decided to just give up and die, but he knew something was wrong. He knew that the young man was just playing around, as he had put his life on the line. Sojin had bet everything on the slightest chance of survival. Using his skill, Isaac figured it was a chance for him to get out too. The scumbag made a dash to the side, and then saw the young man who was hiding very close by. Sojin tried to use his skill as Isaac did a mana ejection. The man finally found the insolent man, and so he kicked him with his foot, but the young man defended himself with his arm, but still flew straight into the wall. Isaac supposed that even though he didn't use the mana ejection, he could change the gravity. And if it came to that, he would have to use mana drain. Isaac knew that the only sure way for Sojin to eject from the cockpit was to use a parachute. He even assumed that the young man would try to escape with his comrade by parachute. Though they were slowing down with gravity and auxiliary engines, there was only 1 minute left until they would crash into the ground. Soon the scumbag saw sparks in the wall that Sojin came out of, and Isaac assumed that the young man would go all the way. Looking at Isaac, who was now activating his abilities, Sojin tried to use his skill to attack him, but he only dodged and was immediately behind him, preparing his dart. At this moment, Sojin pulled out a container from his inventory to defend himself from the projectile. Isaac knew that he wouldn't grab the dart itself, but would choose an object to block it. At that moment, the scumbag squeezed the dart with such force that it easily shattered the container into small pieces, leaving Sojin's defenses open. The young man was stunned, for this could end badly. Isaac lunged forward and then hit Sojin with such force that he flew towards the wall, knocking over all the boxes and supplies. Isaac was badly hurt. After all, with that arm, he can't hit that hard. Sojin was very hard to look at. All he could think about was using mana ejection, but unfortunately he can't do anything about it. Sojin knew that he would have to face reality and do what he could. Holding up his dart, Isaac vowed to finish the insolent man off beyond his reach. He assumed then Sojin would lower his defenses. The young man was trying to think of something at the same time, and when the dart flew in his direction, Sojin remembered the moment when he was able to block the projectile from hitting a Pico. He knew for a fact that he had been able to block it using his skill, and even in the past, when he was tortured by the hallucination skill, he had also used his skill to get out of that field. So Sojin knew that he had the answer. In that case, he could keep the skill, he could bring it back. At this moment, Sojin raised his finger upwards, whereupon it shone with a blue light, from where a dart burst out and struck Isaac. And Isaac's own dart missed, and Sojin only felt a slight chill on his skin. Isaac was surprised to see his dart in his body, and Sojin himself fell down as that slight chill froze his face off. Still, the young man was glad he had succeeded. Looking at Isaac's dead body, he could proudly say that he was able to win with his own strength. Sojin soon saw Apiko, who said that she had adjusted the parachute and felt like she was going to be ballast, apologizing for that. The young man said it was fine, asking only to get out of here. When red lights appeared behind him, he told Apiko that he would break through the wall. But at that moment, he had one thing on his mind. At that moment, he purposely ignored a couple of circumstances. First, why was Netanya only in an etheric state? Second, why did Netanya disappear in the middle of the escape? Sojin felt he could make excuses for being busy escaping from the prison. He could make excuses, of course, but either way, the outcome wouldn't change. At that moment, a stranger appeared and used his skill to attack Apiko, making a hole in her. It was then that Sojin realized that ignoring these circumstances, his choices had led to this outcome. Netanya explained to the stranger that the hero Kim Sojung had defeated the mobile group, and everything had happened just as the man, whose name was Shiol, had said. In that case, Netanya suggested that it was time for them to move on. Kim Sojin was stunned that Apiko had gotten hit. Looking at Apiko, Netanya expressed that nothing would work. She reminded Sojin that children are taught as children not to go with strangers. At that moment, Sojin abruptly removed his clothes to apply them to Apiko's wound. Netanya asked him to keep the girl's clothes on without taking them off. After all, she did the same so that she wouldn't bleed out. She even also said that she was starting to get used to his preservation skill. Standing in front of Sojin, Shiol was dissatisfied as Sojin's skillet was quite limited. Reaching out his hand towards Sojin's face, he even said that the young man's skill was pathetic, and so he immediately sealed him to the floor. When Sojin's face was kissing the floor, however, Shiol asked the young man, "Is the storage skill all he has?" The young man, however, didn't understand what was happening as he didn't see a single movement. Netanya asked Shiol to stop as it was getting dangerous. So the man immediately removed his hand from his face, saying that he had completely forgotten that they had almost crashed. He asked Sojin if he had stored Baikama's fuel. Shiol grabbed him by the neck and asked him again about the storage skill, and then as the ship began to rock from side to side, he fell to the floor and hit his head on the wall. His head was dizzy with incomprehension. He felt like he was going to vomit. At this moment, he couldn't distinguish between enemies and comrades. Sojin didn't understand anything, and so he asked, wasn't he the only one with such a storage skill? Netanya explained that Sojin is the only key to everything. But in any case, she wouldn't reveal all the information about this cat thief. She asked Shiol if he had definitely killed the girl. The man explained that he didn't kill her, but she was mortally wounded. Therefore, in just 1 or 2 minutes, he would die from blood loss. At this point, Sojin came to a standstill. He asked Netanya, what is she trying to accomplish? Can't she send him back to Earth? The princess explained that her and Sojin's principles are indistinguishable. She expressed that Sojin could call it a shared destiny. But Sojung had little faith in that. He thought about the fact that he still had the darts, so he could shoot and kill those two. When Sojin tried to reach for the darts, Shiol used his skillet to interrupt the young man's skillet at the same second. He looked at his finger and didn't understand how this was possible. This man was on a completely different level. Even without the millisecond delay, the moment the youth took out the dart, he immediately wiped it away with the rope as if the masked man knew this would happen. Netanya, meanwhile, asked Kim Sojung's character to stop resisting since they have no reason to fight. She also asked Shiol to calm down and not get so worked up about working with an important key. Shiol of course replied that he would try his best, but he couldn't promise anything. Looking at these two, Sojin rushed forward thinking about the fact that this guy Shiol and Sojin himself, their accumulation skills don't work on each other. And so there is only one way out. Sojin ran up to the cannon and grabbed it and started firing. Shiol was surprised, as the young man's idea wasn't bad. But Sojin has no experience at all. Shiol summoned a metal plate with which he could defend himself from the bullets. Sojin at the same time considered this a success, as Shiol's field of vision was now limited. Sojin noticed that now the man would not be able to see from which angle he would fire. And as the young man fired another shot, the weapon itself exploded, and Shiol repeated to Sojin again that he lacked experience. Because the engine on the mana cannon exploded, the shards bounced into Sojin's body, causing him terrible pain. In any case, Shiol assumed that Sojin had noticed that he had more than just one skill. Sitting on the floor, the bloodied Sojin realized that this man was not from Gehenna. Since he could see Netanya, he was also from Earth. The difference in their skills was simply insurmountable. Sojin thought this man was a hero like him, but then he wondered, how many years had he been flying in those clouds? Netanya explained that Shiola's skill was a copying skill. and he had already copied the accumulation skill. However, because the accumulation skill is special, there are some copying limitations. Therefore, they need the original. Bending down, the princess repeated to Sojin once again that their goals were the same. At that moment, Sojin realized that he was experiencing the feeling of déjà vu again. The fear, the helplessness were familiar to him. The skill of copying other people's skills, to them Sojin's skill was also copied. The young man knew that only one person could do such a thing. He remembered the scene when the unknown person killed Princess Natanya. The effect of the skill, the method of using it, all of it led the young man to think that the culprit who had gotten him into Gehenna was Shial. Yelling at the vile bastard, Shial was glad that Sojin had finally realized everything, and now he was at the starting point of calling him an inexperienced idiot. Shial used the skill and immediately found himself in front of Sojung. Ipiko, on the other hand, was slowly dying as she had a fatal wound. Her eyes were filled with memories of her hard life that she had forgotten. She had been treated very cruelly and had eaten human flesh in order not to starve to death. But she also remembered her commander's words that Ipiko must return alive. But the girl felt that she could not fulfill these orders, as she already had one foot in the grave. Ipiko realized that she didn't have time to review her life. Since her brain was still working, she needed to think about what could be done. She considered that perhaps their last enemy was the opposition group on the other side. Ipiko assumed it must be the Royal Alliance. But she didn't understand. Where were they hiding? How could they have picked some random ship in such a dire situation? She wondered where and when had they chosen this ship. But most importantly, why did they come alone? Ipiko watched as the engine in the mana cannon exploded and shrapnel hit Sojung's body, and that Shial had said he had more than one skill. In that case, Ipiko assumed that Shial had the foresight skill, which was why they knew which ship they would be boarding and therefore hid in the cargo hold. She couldn't believe they were just pawns in a predetermined future. She took up the gun, and even though she knew that losing was inevitable and she had accepted her fate long ago, she was determined to save Kim Sojung. When Shial finally grabbed the young man, he asked Sojung to keep quiet, much to the surprise of the young man who didn't understand why. But just at that moment, a shot from a cannon hit Shial's arm. It was Ipiko who had taken that shot, and Shial assumed that it would be easier to just wait for his dying hour in silence. At the same moment, Ipiko used a skill reset, which surprised the man, as it was the girl's last attempt at resistance. Standing up from the ground, the girl expressed her belief that since she had lost, she could interfere with them a little. Looking at her hand and letting go of the boy, Natanya ordered to kill the stray cat and protect the hero. But Shial realized that there was nothing to be done here, so he ordered to leave. Standing beside the furious Ipiko, who was burning with hatred, Shial realized that self-destruction would begin in 15 seconds. He ripped off a tube of some kind of gas and said that it would be 6 seconds before teleportation became impossible and Natanya would be stuck here. She inhaled the gas and asked if the man had caused the skull to reset, but there was no answer. They only said goodbye to the hero Kim Sojin, hoping to see each other next time. At this point, Sejun was trying to reach out to Ipiko to keep her conscious. Ipiko said that she had always wanted to see him, as she had admired him since she was a child. The only one who can save this rotten world is Sojin. Sojin tried to stop the girl, asking her to complete the reboot, but she only asked him to save the rotten world. Sojin couldn't believe that this was happening right in front of his eyes, because not so long ago, Ipiko was by his side. But something happened that no one could have expected. There was a huge explosion with Ipiko and Sojin in it. Soon the meeting at Gehenna's headquarters began. The secretary told the commander-in-chief one of the news, and then this old man said that there had been an escape in Gehenna. This news sent everyone in the gathering into shock. He asked the warden how they would handle it. After all, Gehenna was an impregnable heavenly fortress from which no one had ever escaped. Losing that status is a big responsibility. The man with glasses told the old man not to talk nonsense. He expressed his belief that this old man was the one who had scheduled the pointless meeting when they were so busy, and was now preventing them from doing anything himself. He really didn't understand what it was. The man with glasses also suggested that this old man wanted to be done away with because he was old and sick. The old man asked the warden if her caretaker was all right, as the old man thought he was out of his mind. The overseer paused for a moment, and then informed him that although the co-worker was from Earth, he could be trusted. In that case, everyone felt that the meeting should end here. The commander-in-chief informed the overseer that there would soon be a plan to capture the escapee, and said that the hero's party would also be included. He expressed his confidence that someone would have to take charge either way. When everyone left, however, the overseer became furious. She was well aware that everything had been planned from the beginning, and they were just using them as scapegoats. The man tiredly plopped down in his chair and voiced his displeasure, that he was fed up with them, both the imperial and royal alliances. He couldn't wait for them to unite and stop fighting for their interests. At first they had a fight with demons, but now they were fighting against each other. After listening to this bespectacled man's arguments, the warden concluded that everything had been planned, their exclusion from Gehenna and Kim Sojung's escape as well. In that case, she suggested that they needed to deal with that first, so she asked to schedule a meeting with the supervisors and make sure that the entire strike team from the 6th floor was in place, because they had to find Kim Sojung at all costs. Well, somewhere out at sea or in the ocean, the ship that Sojun was on can be seen. In the place where the massacre took place, many people panicked, because there was a complete lack of medical supplies. 47 people killed, 58 wounded, and another 120 with minor wounds and contusions. In addition, as it turned out, died 2 more of the mobile group. In that bag, there was Amber, who was actually kind of pitiful. The warden said that they would inform the families of the dead and injured a little later. The bald man wanted to object, but the overseer went on to say that the most important question now was how they had managed to get through the guards in Gehenna. She knew that the test room had a special system to prevent magic leaks, but still she didn't understand how they bypassed it and used skills. After all, other than the pipe in the center of the room, testing is impossible to use magic anywhere else. All magic ends in a small flash when you try to use it. That's why the guards in this room are armed with magical weapons. Sitting in the meeting, she suggested setting up a time paradigm based on their data to begin with. She named the intruders and their skills. It was a Pico with the distortion skill, followed by Devil with the shadow skill, while the last ones were the converts. The warden assumed that the person with the infection skills was first in contact with a guard from Gehenna. Perhaps their target was the guards who were on vacation. After that, the shadow figured out the location of those guards who were on vacation. And from the looks of it, they were in a place without proper privacy. The redhead wondered if they needed to calculate the location of the personnel who were on vacation. But the girl found that difficult. Moreover, she was sure that it was impossible to control all the officers. The supervisor asked for silence and told her to continue. In that case, she continued to explain the fact that the guards, after everything that happened to them, returned to Gehenna and underwent body and mental checks. However, given the possible circumstances, it could be assumed that they contained the shadow skillet in their internal organs. At this moment, the overseer stood up and realized that this was exactly what had happened. They had used the infection skill to disarm those in the testing room. They controlled the guards and shut down the system. The warden couldn't believe that these scum had actually planned this. The girl thought that they wanted to start a war again, expressing her belief that the empire and the kingdom were definitely out of their minds. Soon, the overseer turned to the mobile group, asking them to express their opinions. The white-haired man asked the she-wolf to pull the card sooner rather than later, for while she made up her mind, the sun might eat. Soon Aaron from the 6th floor mobile group expressed his belief that this was the empire's shenanigans. And Caleb was in agreement with his comrade's opinion. But the she-wolf siren couldn't answer, because she was busy playing cards. And the harpy girl named Momi wasn't even going to answer as she was just resting. A blindfolded elf named Cecilia assumed it was a kingdom, as they wanted to steal the key from the empire. An old man reading a book named Zatra agreed with Cecilia's opinion. But Amber, who was already dead, couldn't say anything. Aaron put the cards aside and asked him for what he had to say, but still asked, shouldn't we keep an eye on the runaways? And the overseer said they were all right and the order to catch them had already been given. The captain of the mobile team, Lee Taehyun, recognized the approximate location. 3 hours ago, they were within 8 kilometers of Gehenna. The man was angry that Kim Sojun had killed his co-worker named Amber. The warden asked the captain if he was going to personally capture the prisoner, and Daehoon answered in the affirmative. Upon hearing the answer, she explained that she couldn't allow it, as they had already lost 2 members from the mobile team, and it was inevitable in her opinion. The man couldn't what the overseer meant. In that case, she explained that Isaac wasn't that good in battle, Amber was a rookie, so they didn't stand a chance. She assumed the man was aware of that since their job involved situations like that, and it was Amber and Isaac's turn. With no other choice, the man gritted his teeth and ordered Serene and Momi to handle the case, as well as help the group of heroes. A tired Momi found it very boring, but still, she must avenge her colleague. Soon a portal opened, and out of it crawled Shyal and Princess Natanya. She asked her comrade for an explanation as to why he was making decisions on his own. She wasn't happy that he wasn't done with the cat and left the hero on the ship. Also, she didn't understand why their operation coincided with the Imperial operation. Shial replied that they should have done so. He explained that to open the very thing, 2 keys were needed: the Sword of Light and the energy of the Chosen One. The latter is what we can't get, a hint about Kim Sojung. Shial knew that Kim Sojung had to do it himself, reset the storage skill. Natanya understood that, after all, it had been decided before the summoning. But still, she thought that if the original plan didn't work out, they would squeeze the storage skill out of him and force him to reset it. But Shial objected because Kim Sojun could do the reset in a different way. Natanya eventually gave up and decided to let the situation go. But still, he didn't convince her. She reminded Shial that in order to solve his problem, she needed to accomplish her goal. She asked her comrade if he still wanted to return to Earth. The man asked not to touch his wounds and also not to be so sensitive, because Kim Sojung is safe and sound. Soon our hero woke up, who was not in a very good condition. He was completely bandaged. In addition, he was tied to the bed, not realizing what was going on here and where he was. And just as Sojun was making noises, 2 unknown individuals walked in. One of them looked like a dragon. The other was an elf with green hair who was glad that their stranger was already awake. Sojun is lying on a bed, bound at the arms, with 2 men standing around him, one looking like a man with pointy ears, the other an anthropomorphic creature with red and black features. The elf says, "Awake, stranger?" The man with ears looks at Sojun and asks, "Can't you see well?" It looks like a medical examination. Perhaps they are examining Sojun's condition after he wakes up. The red creature ponders, making an extended sound. It is clearly observing Sojung's condition and pondering something. Sojun asks in his head, "Who are these people?" He is clearly disoriented, doesn't understand what is happening, and wonders, "Am I in a hospital or am I in hell?" Close-up of Sojun's hand, which is struggling to move. You can see that he is handcuffed and trying to free himself. Sojun begins to formulate a plan of action. We need to attack first and take them by surprise. He decides to hurry up and get out of here, realizing that the situation is unfavorable. The red creature notices something strange about Sojung's eye. It says, "There's something strange about his eye." It then adds that Sojun has many complaints, referring to the doctor. The doctor, the same man with the ears, says he warned them not to tie Sojung up. The red creature replies that they can't keep an earthling for nothing. Sojung's eyes begin to glow blue and he is focused. You can see electrical discharges begin to form around his hand. Sojun, with a fierce expression on his face, decides to use force. He is clearly preparing to free himself, despite all the obstacles, because this rope is not an obstacle to him. The doctor and the red creature react with surprise. They are clearly dumbfounded by Sojung's actions. Sojun rushes forward, his fist aimed at someone. He is determined to take action. He decides to use all his strength to free himself. Sojun places his hand on the bed and blue lightning begins to emanate from it. His energy becomes visible, demonstrating that he is ready to use his power. Sojun rises from the bed despite the handcuffs on his hands and feet. Electric shocks encompass his body, and he is ready to resist. Sojun gets back on his feet despite all the obstacles. His determination is evident in the way he tries to hold on even under such difficult circumstances. Sojun starts running away from the doctor and the red creature. He decides to act quickly while he has a chance to escape. The doctor calms the red creature by telling it, "Hold on a second." He's clearly up to something and wants to keep the situation under control. The doctor says emphatically, "I'm on it." He clearly takes responsibility for further action to control Sojung. Sojun runs down the hallway, trying to find a way out. He expresses annoyance by exclaiming, "Damn!" clearly facing difficulties. Sojun asks himself at a loss, "Where am I anyway? What happened?" He tries to recall the last events he remembers, which emphasizes his disorientation. Sojun suddenly remembers the purple explosion, which discourages him a bit. Sojun, exhausted and tired, can barely stay on his feet. He makes a faint X sound, which shows his physical pain and fatigue. A green magic trail appears on the ground, accompanied by the footsteps of a person. It looks like someone has started actively pursuing Sojun. The doctor runs after Sojung down the corridor, shouting, "Stop!" He is obviously trying to stop the fugitive and catch up with him. Sojun ponders, realizing that he has encountered a normal release of magical power. This realization probably gives him a sense of danger. On Sojung's shoulder, someone places a hand to stop him. This unexpected intervention will probably stop his escape. The doctor crouches next to Sojung, who has fallen to the ground. The doctor tries to hold him down while providing care. The doctor breathes a sigh of relief and tells Sojung that he shouldn't run out into the hallway. He wants to prevent further dangerous actions. The doctor tells Sojung to calm down first, trying to settle the situation and convince him not to act impulsively. Sojun's eyes show a glowing blue glow accompanied by electrical discharges. His condition clearly indicates a serious power that is beginning to awaken within him. Sojun and the doctor are flying through the air after the floor beneath them collapses. They try to hold on, but they are surrounded by electrical energy. The doctor and Sojun fall to the ground, screaming loudly in pain. They both end up on the floor in awkward poses. Sojun, breathing heavily, begins to realize what is happening. He looks worried and exhausted. A green-skinned humanoid appears, watching intently. His expression remains unperturbed. A woman with a serious expression is also observing the situation. She seems disturbed by the events taking place in front of her. The child is holding the woman's hand and sucking her finger, clearly frightened by what is happening. He looks on with curiosity and concern. Sojun tries to get up, realizing the need for a quick response. A girl with a red magical aura appears nearby and kicks the guy. Sojun decisively clenches his fist, and red energy lights up around him. He looks fierce and determined, causing the people around him to be surprised. A girl with a magical aura attacks the doctor and Sojung, knocking them down. She clearly uses magic to subdue him. The girl asks, "What are you doing here?" And Sojun reacts to her appearance. He realizes that she is also using magical powers, and begins to realize that the situation is getting more and more complicated. Sojun remembers Isaac and his powers. He realizes that the girl is strong, but not as strong as the mobile group in the prison. Then a girl with horns and red eyes watches intently. Sojun realizes that he has to seize the moment, pull her closer and kill her. Sojun decides that he can handle it. He convinces himself that he has enough strength, since he has already killed 2 enemies before. Sojun promises that he will get out of this place at any cost. He is tense but determined, and determination burns in his eyes. Suddenly, a mysterious hooded figure appears behind Sojung, watching Sojung. It was Shiol. He demands that he prove his determination and strength. The green-haired doctor exclaims sharply to stop everything that is happening. He tries to take control of the situation to calm the tension. The doctor explains to the girl with the horns that Sojun is a traveler from Earth. He asks her to calm down and give him time to deal with the situation. The doctor adds that it is logical that Sojun shows surprise and confusion, given that he is an alien from another planet. He tries to communicate and relieve the tension. Sojun, sitting on the floor, looks confused and pensive. He clearly needs time to realize what is happening. Finally, the doctor bows to Sojung and apologizes for his friend, explaining her temper. He tries to build rapport and help Sojun calm down. Sojun asks what this place is and how long he's been out. His gaze is downward, showing that he is confused and trying to realize what is happening. The elven man in the white robe explains that they are in the 17th pioneer village of the kingdom. He adds that Sojun has just arrived and doesn't know anything about the place yet. The man advises Sojun to see it as a different world. Sojun is wary and begins to suspect something amiss. His gaze turns serious, and he wonders if everyone really thinks he's just an ordinary earthling who happened to be here. Sojun recalls the words of the warden who mentioned that random earthlings might appear here in addition to the heroes. Other strange characters are depicted in the background, confirming his thoughts. The elf mentions that there isn't much time left before the Gehenna units arrive. Sojun reacts surprised and asks if he slept half the day, implying that he missed something important. The elf doesn't understand why Sojun is talking about half a day. He looks puzzled and recounts the word hesitantly, as if the concept is not entirely clear to him. The elf informs Sojun that he has been asleep for 3 days, much to Sojun's surprise. His eyes widen with shock, and he is clearly amazed at how much time has passed. A sea strewn with debris is shown, with several ships cruising over it. Apparently, the kingdom has mobilized all its forces to deal with some threat or to prepare for something important. The girl, Garpia, watches from the deck of the ship and wonders if the kingdom has mobilized all its power. The sight of the ship and the wreckage creates an atmosphere of impending crisis. A hyena girl standing on the deck of a ship, focused on working with some sort of tool. The hyena girl looks worried. A drop of sweat can be seen on her face, indicating tension. She holds a small cat or bear-shaped toy in her hand. Then the toy disappears from the hyena girl's hand. The harpy girl sitting upstairs reports that something seems strange. She also mentions a problem with traders in Gehenna. The harpy looks surprised. She asks if they are the targets of the inspection. The toy she was holding accidentally slips out of her hands. She says, "Oops," in surprise as she looks at the falling object. The toy falls into the water, causing panic. The girl screams as she watches the toy quickly sink into the water. Next thing you know, some guy shows up. The guy is holding some sort of white card, which begins to glow with a green magical light. He declares that he is on time, indicating the importance of his action. Now this toy is surrounded by a magical green light. It seems to have been activated and is beginning to emit a powerful glow. The girls exchange glances, expressing surprise. A guy is standing on a wooden deck holding something in his hands. He looks concentrated and is told, "At last you have arrived." He appears in the company of two other characters. Finally, the very same group of heroes has arrived. A little earlier, the same guy is standing in a room surrounded by light emitted from screens. His gaze is upward, and he expresses surprise. His gaze now focused on the light, not realizing what was happening. Looking at Sojin, he asks what it is, while Sojin exclaims happily, "I've become the protagonist of another world, haven't I?" A look of alarm appears on his face as lightning bolts pass over his head. He looks at his hand, on which a glowing object appears, and ponders, "Command?" Realizing a new ability, Princess Netanya approaches Sojin, asking him to spread his arms and stand straight so she can test his skillet. Suddenly, an object filled with energy appears in his hands. Lightning bolts radiate from his fingers, and sound effects emphasize the activation of the power. The guy realizes that his own skillet has manifested itself before him. This surprise is reinforced by the lines of text in the background, which are probably part of the downloaded information. He feels like he always knew how to use this ability. Guy notices that the information needed to understand the skill has been automatically integrated into his mind. His face expresses bewilderment. He is trying to understand why the princess needs to test his abilities when he already has all the information. A bright digital projection that looks like a stream of data suddenly appears in front of him. It consists of many colored pixels, which hints at the virtual nature of what is happening. The vision intensifies, the flow becoming more vivid and intense. The guy is clearly tense, his facial expression betraying anxiety. He falls to the floor, grabbing his head and trying to come to his senses. He has trouble understanding what exactly is happening, and the situation is clearly throwing him off balance. He becomes heavy and starts to say that his head cannot stand what is happening. Other participants can be seen nearby who are also in an unstable state. Soon he notices Sojin being pinned to the ground, abruptly giving orders not to move. Sojin asks to wait, but his position remains helpless. The guy's look conveys fear and confusion, with drops of sweat on his face. He clearly does not understand why he is in this situation. The policeman presses Sojin on his head, and the guy screams his innocence. He is not given a chance to explain himself, which increases his despair. The boy stands confidently and slightly smugly. His gaze is directed to the side, and he is holding a toy in his hands. The wind flutters his hair, creating an atmosphere of confidence and freedom. Two large boats with people on board are moored to the shore. Dark silhouettes on the decks are discussing something, and the calm water reflects the sunlight. On the wharf, the lad meets two creatures resembling a hyena and a harpy. They listen to him with attention, although he admits that he is not yet used to such company. The guy explains that he was referred to them as partners, but expresses doubt, pointing to someone as a mongrel. His tone seems more sarcastic than serious. The hyena is silent in response, only staring intently at the guy. Her calm expression may hide irritation or indifference to his words. A tall man behind the guy's back makes a remark, urging him to observe manners. The guy, however, does not look embarrassed and only repeats the word manners, as if it were something new to him. The guy is surprised to notice that the partners are asking for something important. At this point, Harpy gets a little nervous. All group members gather on the deck, discussing the distribution of roles. The boy emphasizes his seniority, which elicits mixed reactions. The harpy decided to pick up her toy, but the hyena did it instead. Guy looks at the hyena, curiously questioning why he would want to be polite. The hyena, sitting on the floor, is silent, not giving away his emotions, but the situation is clearly escalating. Guy asks a direct question about the purpose of their gathering, noting that he is still not clear on the full picture of what is happening. His facial expression conveys concentration and expectation of an answer. The harpy looks at him with a slight reproachful look, pondering how his words about rushing didn't match the fact that he'd been getting there all day. Her gaze is focused and slightly mocking. The group discusses the task of catching the escaped criminal. One of the participants emphasizes that the situation was the result of the guilt of those present, referring to the king's words. The guy expresses his displeasure at having to clean up after others, asking sarcastically if they can't solve their own problems. His gaze is directed to the side, showing irritation. The harpy comments on the situation, pointing out the unfortunate result of their actions. Her tone conveys regret or slight dissatisfaction. A boat is seen in the background, and someone in the group notes that most of the evidence has settled to the bottom, complicating further searches. The difficulties become apparent. The group discusses the loss of a comrade who was able to follow the trail. As such, they ask for help in using the hero group skill to compensate for the loss. The guy with the black hair encourages the others to embark on a task to demonstrate their abilities. The response is short, but with a willingness to take action. One of the crew members rapidly jumps off the board, showing determination. His movement is powerful, accompanied by vivid effects. His hand touches the water, creating a purple glow and strange electrical sparks. The energy intensifies, emphasizing the importance of his intervention. The masked participant reports that the information has been successfully read. His eyes glow purple, emphasizing the use of an unusual skill. A plan of action is discussed. Using memory reading and visualization skills, the plan is to reconstruct the past. This process involves the participation of all members of the group. The bald man orders the visualization to start. His serious expression conveys the importance of this moment. The background shows the devastation caused by a powerful explosion. The energy tears the space, leaving chaos all around. A bald man comments on the difficulty of analyzing what is happening in a nonlinear space. He emphasizes that only a superficial picture of events is available. It is suggested to go back to the moment before the explosion to better understand the cause of what happened. The visualization continues to immerse participants in the details of the disaster. The explosion becomes clearer, revealing the epicenter of the cataclysm. The magical energy spreads, destroying everything in its path. Harpy reflects on the assembled group, noting that basic skills are present and its composition seems impromptu. She notices details as she analyzes the big picture. Suddenly, a bright stream of energy resembling a human figure appears in front of them. The harpy is surprised by the unexpected phenomenon. A stream of energy rushes in, forming a magical chain that links past and present. The harpy calls this event the leap phenomenon. A guy with black hair sits in a relaxed pose, contemplating what the phenomenon of the leap represents. He compares it to a bug or glitch in games, pointing out the instability of what is happening. It is further explained that this phenomenon occurs when time and space skills are utilized in unstable environments. Such situations cause distortions and temporal anomalies. It is specified that people who happen to be in the vicinity move in time and space. It is assumed that the cause of what happened was a special skill of distortion. The wooded area serves as the place where the perpetrator was transported to. He was not killed in the explosion, but traveled to the near past. The heroes discover an area with obvious signs of displacement. The damage at the site indicates the unnatural nature of what happened. Draconid and Sojin discuss how far the criminal was from the village. Draconid remarks that he was lucky to avoid the worst of it. Sojin tries to understand what has happened. His thoughts are focused on the aftermath of the explosion and the time distortion. Questions about why he was in this forest only add to the mystery. The situation requires further explanation and analysis. Soon a blonde girl appears and informs him of the disturbing news. He mentions that Princess Natanya has organized a press conference. Sojin is alarmed when he learns of the intention to summon the hero. He looks worried, and his reaction indicates that he is aware of the possible consequences of this decision. In a conversation with Princess Natanya, one of the people present asks her why the decision was made to summon 4 heroes at once. He reminds her that the last time a hero was summoned, it created a danger to the kingdom. The princess explains that the uncontrolled summoning of heroes 9 years ago led to war. She also emphasizes that the kingdom's alliance still remembers the harm done by the empire that time. The princess goes on to point out that the kingdom's alliance is too weak right now. She emphasizes that summoning heroes is a necessary step to protect them. The host expresses doubt about the situation, saying that they are not in a state of war. He also believes that the reaction of the people to the call of the heroes will be negative. In the city, a screen showing the princess announces that the heroes will be in full control. The people wonder when they will finally see peace. Various remarks are heard around about the resumption of the military encirclement. In the forest, someone politely asks Sir Mercenary to explain the situation again. Apparently, the details of what was happening were not fully understood. A group of characters in the forest continue a dialogue. One of them asks a question concerning what is happening and asks for an explanation of the details, even though the topic does not directly concern him. Draconid says that the heroes are being summoned 9 or 10 years after the last time, which seems odd. It is also emphasized that this time 4 heroes are being summoned at once. Sojin listens attentively to his interlocutor and asks a question concerning the murder of the princess, which is said to have never happened before. He looks worried, and his interlocutor inquires about his condition, pointing out a possible injury. Sojin wonders what has happened around him. His face looks worried and puzzled. Sojin begins to remember that Princess Natanya is alive and the heroes have not yet been summoned. He notices that events are unfolding as if he has traveled back in time. Sojin speculates that all of this may be connected to Apiko's suicide. However, he remains in the dark, not understanding the exact reason for what is happening. Sojin feels confused and depressed. He admits that he feels as if he has died and entered the afterlife. Soon Draconid informs us that the sightseeing is over. He warns that this is a dangerous area full of monsters. Several tedious days passed. Sojin is explained that regenerative medicine has helped a little, but there remains a risk of infection. He is reminded to use the medicine to prevent complications. The doctor or assistant warns that scars are likely to remain and can only be removed surgically. Sojin says it doesn't matter. Sojin looks at himself in the mirror, pondering the fact that the scars can't be completely removed. Sojin continues to stare at his reflection. He doesn't seem to like his face very much, but damn, he looks much more manly now. Sojin examines his reflection in the mirror and admits that the scars look ugly. Despite this, there is some determination and acceptance of his new look in his smile. The doctor explains to Sojin that his hair was cut off during the treatment. Sojin, sitting at the table, wonders if his hair can grow back. The doctor reassures him, saying that it shouldn't be a problem. Sojin expresses that the most important thing at this point is to find a way to get back to Earth. He asks the doctor if he knows a way to get back. Sojin is determined and eager to find the answer. The doctor is troubled and does not know how to properly explain the complex situation. He tells Sojin that it will be difficult for him to explain, pretending to choose words. The doctor asks Sojin to listen carefully and understand what he is going to say. He agrees to explain everything as simply and easily as possible so that Sojin can understand the situation. The doctor informs Sojung that, unfortunately, it is impossible to return back to Earth. This is a hard truth that complicates all of Sojung's plans. Sojin silently takes in what has been said, pondering what he has heard. After a short pause, he says clearly with restraint, accepting the reality. The doctor uses the analogy of a fish trap to explain how interdimensional gates work. He explains that this gate connecting the Earth and this world has a similar structure, where it is easy to enter but almost impossible to exit. The doctor continues to explain that due to the peculiarities of the gate structure, it is possible to get here from Earth, but it is impossible to return back. This explanation illustrates the one-way nature of traveling between worlds. Sojin asks the logical question of whether there is some way to improve or create new gates to make a difference. He suggests that you could make them bigger or change the working conditions to be able to return. The doctor ponders thoughtfully, looking away, and says that according to the records, the gate was created about 2,000 years ago. These structures are very ancient, and the technology to create them has been lost. Sojin, listening intently, wonders, has the technology been lost? He tries to understand what happened to the gate-making techniques and why the modern world cannot reproduce such knowledge. The doctor goes on to explain that, theoretically, the gate could be attempted to destroy it to increase its size, but that would require a colossal amount of energy. It is an extremely difficult and dangerous task. The doctor clarifies that the energy needed is so enormous that using it could destroy their world. Sojin understands the scale of the problem and realizes that this solution is impossible. Sojin concludes that destroying the gate is impossible and says so with confidence. He realizes that they have no way of solving the problem that way. Sojin thanks the doctor for his explanation and says that everything is clear to him now. The doctor apologizes for not being able to provide good news for Sojin. Sojin leaves the room and the doctor says, Please don't hate our world. He turns to Sojin, realizing that despite the hardships, one must not allow oneself to fall into despair. The doctor is alone in his office and reflects on the world in which people live. He recognizes that this world can be unpredictable and full of challenges, but that is its uniqueness. Despite all the flaws, the doctor finds this world worth living in. He sees something valuable in it that makes it suitable for living despite the difficulties. Sojin closes the door and is about to walk down the hallway, showing his determination to keep moving forward despite all the obstacles. Sojin reflects on the fact that he won't be able to return. A tired and somewhat despairing "huh" sounds in his head. After hearing Sojin's question about whether he could return, Natania replied that they had common goals. This made Sojin think about her words. Suddenly he wonders, what does this mean? Doubts and questions overwhelm him. He wonders if there is no way to return home. On the training ground, a woman appears, ready to attack with a sword, and a man tries to block the attack. The two warriors engaged in a fierce battle, showing off their skills. One of the warriors makes a sudden movement and the blow hits his opponent's sword, causing him to drop his weapon. At this point, the woman falls and the man is left with the sword, showing that he has prevailed in this confrontation. The man says that it doesn't work that way. He points out that if she wants to stay under his command as a mercenary, she must last at least 3 minutes in combat. The attention then shifts to the presence of monsters nearby. A man notices that monster tracks have been discovered nearby. These monsters are biological weapons left behind by demons. Their appearance and behavior are fearsome and warn of impending danger. The man notes that he does not know what brought the monsters here, but there is a leader among them. This fact inspires fear and the need for caution. He also reminds his student that without proper caution she could be killed. She looks tense and realizes the seriousness of the situation. In the end, the girl agrees and replies that she understands everything. She realizes how dangerous the situation is and decides to act with the utmost care. As it turns out, the mercenaries are stationed in the village. Sojin reflects that he would like to make contact with them if possible. Sojin realizes that he needs information, especially the mana release. He intends to find a way to become stronger. Sojin feels it's like trying to increase friendship points with NPCs like in the game, but he admits to himself that he's not very good at it. Night had fallen and everyone was long since asleep in their soft beds. A long corridor is then shown leading into the unknown. We see a sleeping Sojung lying on a bed, who doesn't know what tomorrow has in store for him. But what is it? Someone's feet are in Sojung's room. No way, is that girl trying to kill Sojung? Oh no, wake up Sojin. This girl is trying to cut off your dignity. You want the next part? Write the secret word in the comments. Control. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and put a like. Bye bye.